Welcome in, BizBees. This is part 2 of our Futures Pennant. Last time we left off, we put in a background image and applied some photo filters and layer adjustments to our image. So it's like a black and white, got a little bit of a red tint to it. And we did that by creating a smart object. We drew in a shape to create kind of like that top piece of or the side piece of a pennant. We'll add some more styling to that later, but for right now it's just gonna sit there. And then we brought in a picture of us, or of me, and we cut ourselves out using the Smart Object selection tool, and we did that using a layer mask and a so far we've done everything has been non-destructive, so we can go back and make adjustments as needed. In this tutorial, what I'm going to do is we're going to add a gradient down here in the bottom half of the pennant to create some black area, some solid color, so that way when I bring in some logos and text and all that, you can actually read the text. Sometimes it's really hard to read text or images when it's over the top of a background image, and there's different strategies for doing that. This is the strategy that I chose for creating that effect. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to our pennant outline, and I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on that layer, and I'm going to create a new layer above it. So I'm just going to click the new layer button down here in the bottom of the layers panel, and I'm going to go ahead and name this bottom gradient. We're actually going to add 2 gradients to our thing. But for now, I'm going to start with the bottom, and then we'll start with the right gradient here in just a sec. So I just named that bottom gradient. It needs to be underneath the felt shape that we created, so it doesn't go over the top of it. And it needs to be that this layer needs to be below the picture of us, so it also doesn't go over our picture. So make sure you have your layer organized in the same way. Over here, I'm going to go click on the paint bucket tool, and underneath the paint bucket tool, we have the gradient tool. So I'm going to select that, and we need to set up some options for this gradient. So I'm going to click on, you'll see a little color swatch there. Click on that, and it's going to bring up your gradient editor. We're going to create a custom gradient, and so right now I've actually already got this set up the way we need to. But here's how you're going to need to set this up. Click on the bottom left stop here, and you want to set that color to white. And then click on the right stop, and you also want to set that color to white. So you're going to probably ask, why are we creating a gradient with 2 of the same colors? That doesn't make any sense. Well, what we're going to do with the top transparency or opacity is we're going to set that to 0. So we're basically going to create a feathered effect with our color. So there's no color here. It's transparent, and it's going to work its way into becoming a full solid color. So we're going from transparent to full solid color here. So what this is going to do is this is going to create a feathered effect from basically where this line is down to the bottom. So it's going to feather in our gradient down to the bottom. So it's not going to be a hard stop with the color. We're just going to feather it in. So I just need to be on my bottom gradient layer that I just created, and you want to kind of pick a spot somewhere in the middle-ish or to the right of your pennant. And all you're going to do is you're just going to click and drag, and I'm going to click and drag from the bottom of that of my line here of our guide. And if you click the shift key, it'll create a straight line down, and that's kind of what you want to do. We're going to play around with this first to see how this is going to go. I'm not going to drag it all the way down to the bottom of our pennant shape. I'm just going to bring it right down here to about the middle. And I think what's going to happen here is we're going to have something that is not going to look good. So I'm just going to show you what this is going to do here. I'm going to click and release, and it's going to put in my gradient, and it's going to bring it over everything. It's going to come outside of our pennant. So that's not something that I want to do. So I'm going to Control Z that real quick. And so then what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to click on our pennant outline again. Remember how I said we were going to use this layer a lot? And then I'm going to grab my magic wand tool, or press the W key on your keyboard, and then click inside of our pennant again. So what we're doing is we're using our selection, we're using the magic wand tool, and it's coming inside of our pennant. What we're doing is we're limiting where that gradient is going to go. So that gradient is not going to go outside of these marching ants. So click back again on your bottom gradient layer, and now take your gradient tool. You can press the G key for that, and or go over to your tools panel and select the gradient. Now come down here and select and click and drag and bring down your gradient. So now you're going to see that gradient fill in. It's not exactly where I want it to be. I want it to be higher. So I'm going to Control Z that real quick. I'm actually going to start my gradient over in the narrower part of the pennant and clicking my Shift key as I bring it down, and then go that route. Not quite where I want it to be. Go ahead and start a little bit higher here and then bring it down all the way. That's getting closer. So I'm going to go ahead and actually go all the way to the top here and bring it down. There we go. That's getting there. I kind of want to do it. I want a little bit less. So I'm just going to go about 3/4 of the way. There we go. That's a lot closer about where I want to be. Okay, so now you can kind of see I've got more of a solid color here, but then you kind of see that gradient coming in and filling in there. You just wanna play with that. Like, you know, if you're not happy with it, you know, the shorter strokes you make here, the shorter your gradient becomes. So you can see in there I've got more of a solid color up there in the top, and the feathers in just a little bit differently. The longer you make your gradient, the more feather effect that you get, something like that. Okay, so if you like the more feather effect, that's kind of where you want to be at. Okay, so you're going to notice here that in my example, this is actually black, and we chose a white gradient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a layer effect. And so over here in your layers panel, and I still have the bottom gradient selected. I'm going to click on where it says normal, and you're going to see all these different blend modes. Okay, so these are all different kinds of blend modes that you can play with. There's some ones that just kind of look funky, right? Some do some things, some don't do others. Like overlay essentially kind of brings it in and overlays over the top of it, and a lot of times it just makes it lighter, especially when you're using like a white color. Sometimes it's just fun to like see what these different ones of these do. What I'm going to select, and this difference one it's really cool, right? But I'm going to actually choose the subtract one. So that's going to give me kind of my black gradient fill there. Okay. So I'm going to hit my Control D. I'm going to get rid of my marching ants there. And so next I want to bring in a gradient that kind of fills in the right part of this pennant. So I need to make a new layer, and I tend to I could do it on this same layer and make it all one layer, but I don't want to do that. I want to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this right gradient. And we basically have to do the same kind of thing here we need to limit where our gradient goes. We don't want it to get outside of where we want it to be. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna employ my one of my favorite tools to use is the pen tool. So I'm going to grab that pen tool, and the pen tool creates a path, and it's super handy. Pen tool you can use for a lot of different things. And what I want to do is just kind of basically find the sweet spot. I want to I want to cover up parts of this area, but I want to save the right part of there. So these trees and this light, they're going to basically go away. So I'm going to click on that and just come down and just kind of roughly outline on the inside here of our thing. Now, what I've done here is I've created a shape. So I want to change that from shape up here in our options to path. And actually, what I'm going to have to do is Control Z that, because I need to start with a path instead of a shape. So I'm just going to have to redo that real quick. And if you did that also, I apologize. If you hit the Shift key here, that'll make it straight. And we're just going to kind of come around and create that area, okay? Now, right now, this is a path. This is not a selection. So to make this a selection, we're going to right-click on that, and we're going to say Make Selection. So what that's going to do is it's going to give us a custom shaped selection. It's going to give us our marching ants, okay? So which is great. That's what I need. Now I'm going to come back and select my gradient tool or push the G key. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before with my gradient. I'm going to start with the left-hand side over here, and I'm going to click and drag it. I'm going to just play around with where I want to feather it. If you hit the Shift key, it'll create a straight gradient there. So you can kind of see, like, you know, it might cover up some of that tree and filter that in there. Just play around with how you want that to look. Do you want that to look a little bit more feathered or not? Trying to get a very specific look here. I'm going to come outside this gradient and just see, I kind of like that a little bit more. You just got to play around with that and find that sweet spot. Where do you want it? Where do you want that gradient to go? Just a little too harsh there for me, so I'm just going to try to feather it out a little bit more. I think I can live with that. I think what I do end up putting in there, it might be, let's go back to my example. I do kind of have more of a hard gradient stop right there. So, and sometimes when you're really zoomed in, it's hard to, you know, like see what you're really working with here. So I'm going to Control Z, and I'm going to go ahead and make this a harder gradient. I think that's the way I have it set up in my other piece. Maybe I need to make my triangle just a little bit bigger. That could be part of that as well. So I can grab, I'm going to Control Z. I'm going to grab my tool here. Actually, grab my marquee. Grab the marquee tool. Will that allow me to resize that? Sometimes. Nope. I'm going to have to redraw that. Darn it. Okay. Well, for time's sake, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to redraw that. I think normally I would, but I'm not going to. So I'm just going to live with what I got here and kind of go... Let's go like that. Okay, that'll work for me. That'll work for me. That's just about what I need. Okay, now that I got that right. See, sometimes it just takes a little bit of playing to get it exactly how you want it to be. I'm going to Control D so I get rid of the marching ants. And then with that same layer, I'm going to apply that same subtract option there. And so what you're starting to see here is you're starting to see that fill in with black. Now, we're gonna do something really cool with this later on, and I know it's kind of looking harsh right now, but it will look better, I promise you. But I want to make sure that I got that gradient in there, and it really made a hard gradient. I might have to go back and play with that just slightly. There is a little bit of line there, so if you need to fix that, again, click your move tool and just bring that in a little bit using the Control key or Options key or Command key if you're using a Mac. So you just want to tweak those edges there so that way it fills in all those little gaps. So you can kind of see how that gradient, you know, it's not the best. I like the one that I did before for the example, but for time's sakes, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to bring in my logo, and I want it to kind of fit with the building here. I want to do a subtle, like, you know, bringing in my logo subtly. So I'm gonna go ahead and save real quick before I move on. Oh yes, apply. Go ahead and save, and close out my picture there. So I don't need to save that. So then I'm gonna go ahead and open. And I have my SOU logo there, and I'm gonna go ahead and open it. And this is a PNG, so I don't have to cut out the background or anything. So I'm just gonna click and drag it and then bring it over. And I want to resize it so it kind of fits, you know, about kind of like maybe right in there-ish. I kind of want to bring it in subtly If you kind of look here, you'll notice that I have a little bit more room. I brought this over just a little bit more. So here's where I could go back in and readjust the picture there. So it does have, I do have a little bit more room, but I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do though is kind of bring this down in here, and I'm going to kind of position it right in there. Now here's the deal. I hit the enter return key so I apply it. And it's okay that it's underneath this felt piece, and I need to go ahead and name my layer over here. So SOU logo. But here's the deal. If I want to make this look subtle, I need to match the angle of this building. So if I just try to put this in here, it's not going to look like it matches all that well. So what I want to do is change the perspective slightly of this logo. And this is going to take a little bit of practice and a little bit of playing, but it is kind of a fun thing to do. So I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to go up to, and I'm going to select Transform, and then I'm going to select Perspective. Now what this is going to do is allow me to change the perspective of this logo. So you can kind of see how I'm changing that perspective, how it's looking like it's coming out at me. And then if I bring it in, it looks like it's going away from me. So these edges here, you can play with these edges and try to match up the plane of this building. So this is something you just got to tweak a little bit. Like if you notice the middle handles here, it'll tweak it that way. So that's kind of, I need to kind of match the angle here of these windows. So if you kind of look at that, that's what I'm going to try to do. Try to match the angle of those windows, and then you can kind of bring that down, you know, like that. And you don't, you know what? And if this is something you don't want to do for yours, I totally understand. You know, if you're not trying to be subtle like me, but I'm trying to be a little bit tricky here and bring in my logo and the name of the college that I went to with the building, and just kind of, you know, just being a little bit more subtle about it. So I'm getting closer here. That just might be the winner. Close. I'm just going to go ahead and call it good for time's sake. That way I don't take up you guys' time watching me play around on this logo. I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter return key. And so that's going to solidify the shape there for me. And it's going to position it just that way. So now I need to blend this in, and so I'm going to use a blend mode to do that. And again, you can just kind of scroll through here and kind of see what's going to work. I'm going to just use the overlay, which is a pretty common method for doing this. Obviously, this doesn't match. We've got a black and white with a red tint, you know, on our photo here. But I'm trying to, you know, be subtle, but also bring out the logo. If I wanted to, I could create this as a smart object and make that black and white, and then apply the same red filter, and I probably would end up with, you know, kind of the same effect. So if that's something that you'd like to do and you want to be more consistent in that way, you know, remember, you just right click on that, convert to smart object, double click, and in this way, this is how I applied it. I went and made this a black and white. And then from there, I applied a photo filter and made it red and gave it a luminosity of about 50% is where it was at. Okay. And then you just hit Control Save or Command Save, come back to your piece, and let's see how it matched up. Not too bad. I think I'll go ahead and leave that. That's something I didn't do in the last one. So from here, I can close these out. That'll automatically apply, close out my logo there, and then go ahead and hit Control S or Command S. So you can kind of see that it's subtle, and it added this to the building when it didn't exist there before. So kind of a cool thing. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put Southern Oregon University in there. And I need to type that. So I'm going to grab my type tool, and I'm just going to make sure that in terms of my layers, I'm kind of like in that same area. So I'm just going to click my type tool, and it's going to be really large because that's where I was at before. You can see in our character panel over here, we can quickly adjust that if we need to, or make it bigger if we need to. I'm just going to go ahead and make that smaller, and then I'm going to start typing Southern Oregon University. Okay. Definitely going to want to make this bigger, and I'm probably going to want to use a very fat and thick font. So I tend to favor a font called Au revoir, and it looks like it's spelled Avenue or Avenir. Let's see here. I'm going to do it as condensed, and I'm going to select heavy. And I want to make this bigger, so I'm just going to click and drag this out this way. And I'm just going to kind of I'm just going to play with it, because I don't want to do this yet. Like, I want to kind of bring this in here, and I just want to see size-wise, like how big I want to make this. So I'm just going to make that just slightly bigger. And I don't care if it goes underneath me, just like that. Okay. Okay, so now I kind of want to do the same thing that I did with, the warping here. So this doesn't look too bad, right? Like, it could kind of work with what I've got going on. And if you look at my example here, I did this slightly different. I did it in white and with kind of this interior like a red piece. So I don't know if I like this one better or not. I do kind of like the way that turned out, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it this way for now. I am going to change my font color over here to white. So change that, because I do want to make that white so it kind of stands out almost like it's a sign. And if I want to tweak the perspective of this, I have to rasterize this layer first. So because it's a text layer, I can't change the perspective on it like I did with the logo. So over here in my text layer, make sure you're happy with this, otherwise you'll have to retype it. Once you rasterize this layer, you can't modify the text anymore. So if you misspelled it, you're going to have to go back and redo this. So right click on that and rasterize type. Now what this is going to allow me to do is come up to my edit menu and select transform and perspective. So here I can change the perspective, and I kind of want to go smaller here, kind of just like making sure that I'm getting that angle right. You can, change that angle just a little bit so it kind of matches. Maybe that's good there. Bring that up just a little bit. Looking good. Boom. I think I'll call that good. I think I kind of nailed it. Now maybe bring that up just a little bit, make it bigger. Making sure I'm trying to match the window angle there. That's really important. That really helps when you have like a reference point with the perspective to match that angle. So it's matching the top, not quite matching the bottom there. I want to make this just a little bit there. That might work just like that. Okay. So I could do the same thing with this. I want to do this as like a blend mode overlay, something like that. So it does look like it kind of blends into the building. I did add a layer style to this, and it kind of had that red in there. So I'm going to go to my effects, a layer effects of inner shadow. And instead of the black, I'm going to make that, and I could make this black. It kind of looks kind of cool that way. I could leave it just that way and then see what a blend mode of overlay looks like. Soft light. You can kind of play around with some of these things, right? Maybe, ooh, that looks kind of neat. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take that off. I'm going to go ahead and play with the inner shadow. Make that red. And change, I kind of want to change the direction, I think. And make the size. Choke distance. Can make the opacity a little bit higher so it kind of gives it a much deeper red. Bring down the distance. Maybe I kind of want to go at an angle there. That looks cool. Let's go 45. There we go. Kind of get that inner red there. I dig that. Okay, we'll go ahead and call that good. And then if you look at my example, I think I did a little different. I made it all caps. maybe not as good. Maybe I did a better job on this one. I don't know. Sometimes when you do it a couple of times, things turn out different, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and set that to overlay. So it kind of gives that same effect there. I don't know if I totally pull it off in terms of making it look realistic, but I definitely think it is more subtle than just throwing it up there without doing some type of blend mode. So I'm going to go ahead and call that good. I think I like the way that turned out. And I think that's a good stopping point for now. We got a lot done with the gradient and that image and the text. In the next tutorial, I'm going to tackle putting in some of the text that I need to put in, like my name, and bringing in a couple more logos. And then the last tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to make the felt effect, give it kind of a texture look, kind of like a real pennant. So stick around. We got some cool things coming up. Make sure you save before you go. Always save as you go. Really, really important. See you guys in the next tutorial.